Welcome to the Mormon News Roundup, your go-to source for the latest headlines and critical analysis on all things LDS.
Breaking news!
Join D-Vay's
Mormon News Roundup.
That's talent on loan from Kolob every Sunday and Monday night.
We will uncover the truth behind the news that matters most to the Mormon community.
Hey, we're back. It's Mormon News Roundup time. So glad that you would join us. It is March 2nd, 2025. This is episode 153. We have a giant show. I'm so glad that you're here. It's Sunday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when we go live each and every week. But before we jump into our program, I'd like to introduce my fabulous co-host, Ryan. Ryan, how you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is it's a pleasure to be on your show again. It's always fun. I always love following the Mormon news anyway, and being able to chat about it in this type of podcast is really fun for me.
That's tremendous. Great to have you back on board. Now, for those of you who are not aware, Ryan Josiah, who are you and what are you all about? What is your 1 minute Mormon story?
I was as Mormon as you get. I graduated from BYU, returned missionary. I even served in the Provo Temple and sang in the temple dedication choir for the Phoenix Temple. But then I ended up leaving the Mormon Church. It's been almost 6 years ago now. It doesn't seem like that long, but it's been a while now. And a couple of years ago, I started up a TikTok channel that gained more steam than I thought it would at first. And it's been a lot of fun to share Mormon news there and just talk about Mormon doctrine and Mormon history. I've kind of delved more into the history side and just kind of made a name for myself there within the Ex-Mormon crowd. And then recently I've delved a little bit into Utah politics, and that's getting out of the niche of ex-Mormonism. I've done fairly well with Utah politics as well.
That sounds fantastic. I'm a huge fan of your channels. We're going to talk about that a little bit more at the end, but let's go ahead and kick this off. Ryan Josiah, I'm one of your biggest fans. I watch all of your stuff, and I definitely like and follow. Here is your agenda today for today's news. We're going to talk about the F the Mormons chant that has gone viral. This is our number one story. We're going to give you some temple updates. James Huntsman tithing, the resolution of this multi-year tithing. He sued the church to get his tithing back. We'll tell you what happened with that. Ruby Franke is back in the news with a new series, and also her ex-husband has given us new revelations. And finally, the LDS Church is in hot water in Malaysia. We have a giant episode, so let's kick this right off the bat here. In Arizona here, just a couple of days ago, at the beginning of the week, all of a sudden, Arizona and BYU playing basketball in Arizona. People are chanting F the Mormons. And Arizona has apologized for this unacceptable chant from fans at the end of the basketball game to BYU. And Gordon Monson himself said, don't get offended or complain about it. Wear it like a badge of honor. Nobody else gets that kind of special treatment. Nobody yells that kind of thing if they aren't threatened by them, because they win a lot more than they lose. It's a compliment. Let it be. So my question for you, Ryan, is why are so many people chanting F the Mormons? It seems to happen at like almost every BYU sporting game these days.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we keep seeing this. I've seen this repeatedly in the news throughout the years. It's been coming up more and more often these days. I have really mixed feelings about this, in particular, this chant against the Mormons in general, because I think on one side they've been asking for it because of the things that the church has been doing that has gotten national attention, whether that is regarding LGBT issues or money issues or other things. But on the other side of the coin, it shouldn't be happening. It is totally disrespectful, and I admire, was it Arizona State for apologizing just outright? So
yeah, I believe it was Arizona. It was Arizona, not Arizona State. And some of the comments here, it says, "We are so sorry. Our student body is full of religious bigots who have no class and were raised by wolves, so they don't know how to function in polite society." And someone else said, "BYU should walk off the court the next time this happens in a game. Just walk. Don't tolerate it." Is that correct, Ryan? Are these all these Arizona fans? Are they religious bigots, and should BYU walk off the court next time this happens?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd call them religious bigots as much as just rowdy college students who are taking advantage of the attention that they can get, essentially. And as the Mormon Church has been in the news for negative reasons and it rubs them the wrong way, they set their respect and good game. Sorry, what's the word for being a good team member at a game aside, so that they can just take advantage of the attention, which is unfortunate and frustrating in a sense.
Yeah, let me get one of my favorite TikTokers out there, which is the Tomsters. He has a lot of humorous takes. He's going to give us a take on F the Mormons. Let's see what he's got to say.
Ago, Brigham Young University played basketball against the University of Arizona in Arizona. BYU won. Arizona fans weren't happy. Students in the student body started chanting F the Mormons. Mormons are upset, understandably so. Who would want to be said, F you? It's kind of like saying to someone, hey, because of who you are, you're not going to live with your family forever. Or because of who you are, you can't come into our temples. That would be, if in theory, if that were to happen, that's probably what the feeling that you're getting with F the Mormons, it's like, oh, I don't like that. That's, discriminatory. I don't like that. That's rude. Imagine if there was a group that was like, hey, because of who you love, you're not going to live with them forever, despite God making you that way. Ooh. That would be rude. Who would do that? Who would do that? And you would think if that was happening, and you're being told, you're hearing F the Mormons, and it's like, I don't like that feeling. You wouldn't want that feeling to be given to other people from you, in theory. In theory. So a couple of
So what I'm hearing you say, Ryan, and also what I'm hearing the Tomster say, is that the LDS Church is kind of bringing this on themselves because of their discriminatory attitudes and also their bullying practices.
That's funny. I hadn't seen that reel yet, and that's pretty much exactly what I was trying to say, but in a much funnier way. I love the Tomsters because of that. But yeah, that's why. At the end of the game, when things are so tight, and then they just won at the last second, and BYU won at the last second with heightened emotions, they would take advantage of those things that have been happening, that have been rubbing them the wrong way. And that's what, and it's not just, as the Tomster says, it's not just news, it's also doctrine that they know about what with LGBT issues, for example, and families and temples. Everyone knows the temples now. And yeah, I just love how he presented that.
Yeah, Gordon Monson, who is a sports columnist who now is the religion columnist over there at the Salt Lake Tribune, he said, on second thought, if fans want to chant obscenities at BYU games, let them. So are we supposed to condemn these obscenities being chanted, or are we supposed to welcome them? Because he said it was a badge of honor. Is this bigotry or a badge of honor? Everybody is divided about this, and I honestly haven't been able to make up my mind. What do you think?
Well, I guess it's the persecution complex that they're feeding into here, is what I'm hearing, at least, that why don't we take advantage of this and maybe not claim persecution, but at least kind of treat it that way, that we can use it to our advantage. It's what Mormons have always been good at that from the very beginning. That's how they got the term Mormon. I know I'm even breaking the rules now by using the term Mormon, but they at first took advantage of that, because if I remember correctly, it was kind of used as a slur of sorts. And now Gordon Monson is suggesting doing the same thing to let's own that. Let's take that.
Got it. Okay. Now, BYU has recently joined the Big 12. And this little podcast here I came across here, and it says BYU is furious at Arizona fans after anti-Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints chants. And these guys are big sports fans. I'm not the biggest sports fan. I used to be one, but maybe not as big anymore. And they're going to talk about this from an outsider's perspective about what would happen if we had, instead of F the Mormons, what if we had F the Jews or F the blacks? Nobody would tolerate that. So let me play this is about a 5-minute clip for you.
Drake, BYU fans who have been great on the channel, both mine and yours, they're not their typical cheerful selves right now, right? Yeah. A little bit upset with some stuff going on. Arizona with some explicit chants going on. Let's talk about this a little bit. What's your take here?
Yeah, a choice 4-letter word that starts with F. That is where Arizona fans took it during a basketball game against BYU, where the Cougars upset the Wildcats on the road and avenged the loss from a couple of weeks ago. They took themselves in Provo. And when that choice 4-letter word is thrown out, amongst a whole slew of BYU fans who are predominantly members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that word is thrown out with Mormon, which they don't even go by, but it's F the Mormons was the message that Arizona fans gave to them. Immediately the response from BYU, this is in football and basketball and baseball and any sport, is, hey, where did we become okay with religious discrimination? Now, look, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. If someone goes out to the Jewish community, to the Baptist faith, to those who are Catholic and says, F the Catholics, what? Like imagine the uproar if that was to take place over any religious affiliation, and imagine if you were a conference like the Big 12 and you didn't address it in some form. To this point, the Big 12 has not done so. So to me, it feels like a pretty objective issue that the second we start considering one of the world's fastest growing faiths and their flagship program as legitimate, we have to consider that things like this can't just be, kids will be kids. This is what happens in rivalries. I mean, we did like the Catholics versus convicts thing, and that was a big deal. We weren't making fun of people for being Catholic. There wasn't a chant in the student section saying they hate all people who are Catholic. This is a very strong stance that thousands of students at Arizona took very publicly, that was immediately viral, and the Big 12 has sat on its laurels and not said anything, not done anything about this. TJ, is somebody personally who's not a member of the LDS faith, as someone who personally does go to church, though, and is a member of a faith, the last thing I would want is for my faith to be attacked publicly. And then nothing, not a statement from the school, not a statement from the conference, no one in a position of power actually taking up for what I believe in. This is a situation where, to me, the Big 12 needs to be called out. Arizona administration needs to be called out for not addressing this. It happened in football over the course of that season. It happens in pretty much every sport BYU plays, and happened in volleyball as well. And no one's done anything. It's now national enough, now viral enough. To me, the Big 12 has to step in and say, look, religious discrimination, no matter who it's against, cannot take place in this conference.
Yeah, it's so much different. You know, the immediate thing that I think about is how the SEC stepped in and said, like, or I'm how the Big 12, I'm sorry, said that you can't do horns down, right?
Yeah.
But it's so much different than that, right? Like if they were,
it's worse. One of them's a university, one of them's a religion.
Right. If they were saying F the Cougars, right? Like now I like taking my kids to games. I would hope that my university, like if Florida State was doing that to UF, right? And I mean, my kids are there, like, I'm not going to love that. And so I even get that aspect. You know, if it was F the Gators or F the Knowles or whatever, like I would even be like, oh, man, as a dad of two little kids. Now, if my kids aren't there, I don't really care. But there are other people's kids at all these events and stuff. So even just doing it like, but all that said, if they just said F the Cougars, like, I don't know that they would have a lot of leg to stand on, BYU specifically. Like, I don't think you could say like, hey, we're members of a faith. You can't use bad words against us. Like, I think you'd probably have to say like, hey man, just toughen up and, you know, give it back to them on the court or on the field or wherever. But to invoke the religious aspect of it, you mentioned it. Yeah. If you were to do this against some of these other religions, like, it would be a big deal. And so it's so much worse than horns down. It's so much worse than just the team mascot or whatever. And it is strange to me, hopefully we get this video out before the Big 12 makes us a liar, but it is strange to me that the Big 12, at least at this point, time of recording this, Monday afternoon, we haven't heard anything on like, hey guys, let's calm this down a little bit. Like, we're going to start fighting and saying you can't do this. To which then other Big 12 and other programs, ADs and coaches would say like, hey guys, let's give this a rest. Let's not be, you know, engaging in this kind of activity.
Yeah. Again,
Okay.
you know, somebody who went to.
So let me just jump in there real quick. That's about enough on that. So they make a very good point here, Ryan. No one would tolerate someone saying F the Jews. No one would tolerate someone saying F the blacks. No one would even tolerate someone saying F the Catholics. Yet the Big 12 and other people, they seem to condone this just because it's Latter-day Saints. It seems like Mormons are open season, but other people aren't. Am I reading this wrong?
Well, I appreciate getting other perspectives, others who have never been LDS like I was, to see what do others think about this. Because when I feel like I hear it differently than those two commentators heard it. I hear F the Mormons, and I realize that people see the church acting like a business. And they don't like that, and so they speak up about it, type of thing. And other things, just where they don't see it as a religion like Catholicism or Judaism. It's the Mormon Church that owns a quarter of the United States, it feels like, and builds mega malls and dots the earth with their temples that cost $100 million each, and they're just all about the money. And so people see not just a religion, but this organization that's all about money and buildings and visibility.
I think what you're saying is because the Mormon Church, most of what it does is corporate, that it's more of a corporate sentiment than it is a religious sentiment. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, that's what I suspect with the students and where they're coming from and why they would be willing to go that far, to descend that low.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of these Arizona students are probably, let's be honest about it, a lot of them are ignorant about what Latter-day Saints are all about. See, the BYU has now moved into the Big 12, so they're playing more new opponents than they had in times past. They're not just playing Utah or Utah State or Idaho or anything like that. They're playing new opponents, and so I think that the persecution of Latter-day Saints is more acute because they're playing new people in new places. And eventually Arizona did come out and apologize. And I would just like to say, I decry this type of behavior, whether it's F the Mormons, F the Cougars, anything. We should have a civility in public discourse. And I think that
100%.
I think we should have a civility. So let us know. Hey, for those of you out in the live chat, can you let us know what your thoughts are on this particular case? It's still the biggest news article, even though it took place about 8 days ago. This BYU sports is absolutely huge. So people talk about it a lot. Now, our next article here, this is insane here. And I bet you don't know this one, although you do stay up on things. But I think I got something that you may not be aware of, Ryan, even though that's hard to do.
Okay.
Did you know that if you're an endowed member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you don't have to have an active temple recommend anymore to buy garments?
I did not know that. That's really interesting. I've always wondered how they expect people to continue to wear garments if they don't have a recommend.
I found out something very cool. So you actually don't have to have an active temple recommend to purchase your garments. All you need to be is an endowed member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they can actually look you up in their system. So if you haven't worn garments in a while, haven't gone to the temple in a while, and you've been wanting to wear them again, your garments, head to the distribution center, ask them to look you up, and they can find your information, and you can purchase your garments there. Love you guys. Picking up my garments today.
That's a positive message. I wasn't aware of that. Why do you think that has changed? Because once upon a time, you did used to have to have a temple recommend. What's changed?
That's what I've always assumed is the case and thought was the case. Is that a recent change, or is that just that she's just sharing the news that, oh, by the way, you can do this, and I've always been able to do this?
I believe that it is a recent change. Like she said, you can go into a distribution center now or even order them online, and they can just look you up in the system. I think this really goes back to, if I could just jump in on my own thoughts, if you go back to the last General Conference where Elder Oaks and others were really trying to hammer home the garment wearing, I think they're trying to loosen it up. They want to see more people wearing garments, so they're removing restrictions in the hopes that people will wear garments. And that's why one of the reasons that we've seen women's garments in particular, with the tank top garments and the open chemise garments and the other things, is they really want people to wear them, and they're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to wear garments. And this is just another step along the way. Any thoughts on this one?
Well, honestly, it just makes sense, because I've had friends. I even have some in-law relatives people who don't go to church regularly, some of whom haven't been to church in years, and yet they still sincerely believe and still wear their garments daily as they believe they should. And I've always wondered, like, are those garments a decade or more old? Because otherwise, how are you getting them without a temple recommend? You're not even going to church. And or maybe there are nuanced bishops out there who would give a temple recommend as long as you're giving that tithing. But there are definitely some who I've wondered, and so it just makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Next up here, the church is in hot water in Indonesia. This is very interesting stuff here, brought to my attention first by Rebecca Biblioteca. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, better known as the Mormon Church, has officially denied that its volunteers have proselytized Muslims in Malaysia, which is against the law. In a statement today, it took issue with the harmful misrepresentation of our young volunteers featured in an FMT article yesterday. This is freemalaysiatoday.com. An interfaith group has called for action on a duo allegedly proselytizing to Muslims, and they've taken stern action on foreign proselytizers. And here's that article. We're actually going to queue up this video here for you. This is very interesting here. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, though, has responded and has taken issue with the harmful misrepresentation of its volunteers, because this is a screenshot of a recent video showing a resident ordering a pair of foreigners to leave the flats after they allegedly went door to door to propagate their religion, which included some Muslims, which is not lawful. So let's see this video here and get your reaction to this video. I've got this queued up here.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, better known as the Mormon Church, has officially denied that its volunteers have proselytized Muslims in Malaysia. In a statement, it took issue with the harmful misrepresentation of their young volunteers featured in an FMT article recently. It clarified that its volunteers have never engaged in proselytizing Muslims and reiterated its foundational doctrine of obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law. Spokesperson Lee Po Peng said the church has maintained a presence in Malaysia for over 50 years, during which its local members and volunteers continue to uphold the laws of the land and maintain a respectful and peaceful approach in the spirit of religious harmony and unity. In early January, FMT reported that 2 foreigners were confronted by a member of the public after allegedly distributing leaflets on Christianity at Desas Tapak. Police launched an investigation and were reportedly tracking the duo down. In the FMT report on Monday, the Malaysian Consultative Council of Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, and Taoism urged authorities to take stern action on another pair of foreigners who allegedly went door to door at a block of People's Housing Program flats to propagate their faith to Muslims.
Okay, Ryan, what is your initial reaction to this? This is highly unusual.
Well, I believe the church that they have intended for their young missionaries to not proselytize to Muslims. But they cannot say that no one has, because they have indoctrinated these young people so much and so well that I can easily see some of them setting that rule aside for the sake of an individual's exaltation, for their salvation.
Yeah, and that's the problem here. If you're going door to door, eventually you're going to run into some Muslims. It makes it really hard to be a missionary since there's lots of Muslims there. I don't know that much about the country, to be honest, but it sure looks like they were going to door, and therefore that wouldn't be legal. So I do hope whatever happens with these missionaries that they end up following the law, because that's what they should do. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be thrown into jail, and they shouldn't be bringing a bad name to the church. But I have a feeling that these missionaries are not acting rogue. You know, it feels like they're receiving direction. I don't know that for a certainty, but I mean, are they really breaking the rules by going door to door to proselytize or hand out pamphlets? I mean, I don't know.
That's my question, is the door to door part. Like, are they not allowed to go door to door because they might possibly run into a Muslim? But at the same time, I've had experience with that from my own mission. I served my mission in England, where in the London South mission that doesn't exist anymore, but in the south half of London, especially, and other areas, there are a lot of immigrants from all over the place. And so we would run into Muslims from various countries where if an individual were to convert to any branch of Christianity and then go back to their home country, there are some countries where it is legal for their family members to execute them. And so we were not allowed to teach Muslims from certain countries unless we got specific permission from, I believe it was the area presidency. We would have had to, like, if someone came to us and asked us if we could teach them, then we would have had to say no until we get permission, and then ask the mission president, who would ask the area presidency, who would most often say no because of the risks the church and this individual would be taking.
Very interesting stuff. Next up here, we have the new trailer here has hit the new episodes here. I actually haven't had a chance to watch this yet, but it has just hit Hulu a couple of days ago. The Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke. Here's the official trailer. I hope it is not copyright struck, but if you watch this later and it is, that's the reason for it. Let's see what's going on.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door. He's got duct taped around each ankle. He's obviously covered in wounds.
Ms. Franke, how do you plead to count 1, child abuse?
Guilty.
To count 3, child abuse?
With my deepest regret. and sorrow for my family and my children. Guilty.
What Ruby has done, it just crossed a line of abusive to just psychotic.
My wife, Ruby's sole ambition was to be seen as the perfect mom. And so she decided to create a YouTube channel, and we became aid passengers.
Thumbs up, subscribe. Our entire schedule revolved around YouTube. It felt more like a set than a house.
She just wanted to show the view of a Mormon happy family, but they only saw what we wanted to show them.
Sit her down on the flipping couch.
Okay.
Move it. If I hear one more word, get out.
The devil knocked, and we opened the door.
Welcome to Connections. I'm Jody Hildebrand.
Jody was a therapist, and she would prey on the weak. She was excellent at exploiting Mormon anxiety.
Jody began to live at our home. It was uncomfortably intimate. Weird things started happening. Ruby said the children were demonically possessed. That was the spark that blew the powder keg.
911 emergency. Hi, my name is Franke, and my neighbors have been telling me that my 4 younger siblings have been left home alone for about 4 or 5 days.
Open the door!
It was unlike anything I've ever seen.
It's like a ghost story.
I'm still recording! I'm worried about the kids.
Why didn't you stand up to say, this is nonsense? If I dwell on that question, it eats me alive.
Fake being happy. Okay? I don't know if I can right now.
That is absolutely horrible. I cannot believe what I just saw. That is the first time that I've seen that. What is your reaction to that?
That's exactly how I was feeling. You voiced my feelings. I haven't seen that is out to see now, right? You can go on Hulu and watch it.
I believe so. Yeah, my wife forwarded it on to me earlier this week, and I definitely want to watch some of it. I think it's like 3-4 episodes, but I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. That looks incredibly horrific, but sick. I want to.
Yeah.
I definitely want to see it. Crazy.
Yeah, I follow a lot of Mormon news, but this is one story that was, when it was happening, it was like there were too many pieces and moving parts that I just kind of gave up following it. So I'll be especially interested to watch this because that looks absolutely disturbing. There are some LDS Church leaders who I used to totally love and admire, and now I look back and realize they were manipulating my emotions, and it looks like that's what she's doing, but to such a worse degree with her position as a therapist, kind of knowing how you can manipulate people and taking advantage of that with others and with her own children. It's just that looks awful.
Luckily, some justice was served here, and she is currently in prison on a couple of years. I'm not exactly sure how many. I believe it's like 4 to 25. But the father's confession, we saw him in that trailer here. This is just out a couple of days ago. Ruby Franke's husband admits he's still married to disgraced vlogger despite abuse and has questions that eat him alive. He's begged his wife to stop writing him from prison. There's a lot of intrigue with this story, and this is a big news article out there. People really love the true crime. They love to see Mormons behaving badly. And even though this deals with child abuse, which is absolutely horrific, unfortunately, it looks like it's going to make for really good television, which just shows you how sick our modern society is. This is the type of stuff that is getting put onto the silver screen, and people are going to eat this up. It's a big show.
Yeah, I don't know. That kind of rubs me the wrong way in a sense to have a show all about children and the abuse of children on this show that is so popular. I feel like they need closure and they need peace. And this, if putting myself in their shoes, that would do just the opposite, to be thrust into the spotlight and to never be able to leave it behind you.
Yeah,
it'd be tough.
Really sad. Yeah, it definitely would be tough. A couple of other news articles here. And Ruby, Frankie, and Jody Hildebrand were very active Mormons, by the way. They attend a church every single Sunday. And this is a poll that just came out here from the Salt Lake Tribune. Latter-day Saints are among the most devout of any U.S. religious group, and their efforts appear to be paying off. A new study from the Pew Research Center suggests that the church's emphasis on attendance, personal scripture study, and prayer are being heeded. Why do you think that Latter-day Saints here are the most devout of any U.S. religious group? Do you believe that? And if so, what is the reason for that?
Oh yeah, I believe it. At least with the active, it's estimated to be between 4 and 5 million people who are actually active in the church, and at least with them, I totally believe it, because that's how I was raised. That was my whole mindset. Is the church is not just a set of beliefs. It's not just religion. It's a whole way of life. Everything, every decision, whether it's what you have for breakfast or where you go to school or what you do in your retirement, everything in life is dictated by the church to some degree or another. And so, yeah, if you are in, it kind of divides. It's all in or all out is what it ends up being. There are the middle people but it kind of tends to be all in or not in at all. I guess totally inactive or that mindset of it's everything.
Yeah, see, the thing, like you said earlier, there's almost 18 million Latter-day Saints on Earth, but only maybe 4 or 5 million identify themselves as Latter-day Saints. If you were to poll all 18 million of them who are on the rolls, I guarantee you that the church is not going to be among the most devout of any U.S. religious groups. It's only because they're asking people who identify themselves as Latter-day Saints. See, being a backslid Catholic, that's par for the course. In fact, in some ways, that's normal. It's not that big of a deal. There's nothing, to be ashamed about. They go to church, a couple of times a year, no big deal. Usually Latter-day Saints, as you mentioned, they don't go to church a couple of times a year. They usually go all the time or nothing. So I think the survey is highly disingenuous about the activity levels of Latter-day Saints. If you take the most active Mormons and compare them with the most active Catholics or the most active Jehovah's Witnesses or any other religion, I think you will find similar levels of devotion. It's just the fact that we have a ghost membership in the church that is approximately 70% of the church is ghost members, skewing all of the polls and messes everything up.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point with the LDS Church being so divided with all or nothing type of mindset. I was just thinking about comparing it with the Catholic Church. As you mentioned, the Catholic Church has had much more time to mature and develop, and as a result, it is much more accepted within their culture or community to be less active, to use an LDS term, versus in the LDS Church, it's still a young church relatively, and so there's still a lot of pressure, partially because of it being a young church. I think we'll see more and more of that as the LDS Church itself ages and matures, as the Catholic Church has too.
Now, next up, Utah has been ranked the least sinful states in the United States. So let's check this one out too. Least sinful.
Utah has been ranked among the least sinful states in the country, which just goes to show, man, we are so good at hiding stuff. Once again, Utah has been ranked among the
least sinful states. It's amazing how you end up. He's right, though. You do hide a lot of things because Ruby, Frankie, Jody Hildebrand, like we just said, they hid the abuse. Yeah, they hid the abuse underneath and nobody was able to see it. Same thing with Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. There's a lot of hiding that takes place in Mormonism because you're always supposed to put on a happy face, have a shiny exterior, and pretend that everything is sunshine and rainbows. If by chance you meet a frown, do not let it stay. So yes, but let me just ask you real quick. Do you believe that Utah is actually the least sinful state in the United States? Is that accurate?
Oh no, it's not accurate. I mean, there are bits and pieces that might be accurate. If alcohol consumption is your measuring rod, then yes, Utah is the least sinful because of religion and because of our weird laws that keep you from indulging as much as you'd like to. But in general, taking everything into account, there are statistics that we could throw out there that would make Utah the most sinful.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're going. I think I know where you're going. Well,
X-rated materials or body surgeries, or there are plenty of things that one might consider sinful that Utah is number one at.
Antidepressants, not that that's sinful, but mental health challenges, those type of things.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, we struggle in a lot of ways.
Yeah, or
speaking from someone in Utah.
Yeah, or MLMs, having so many MLMs per capita, that's considered sinful. So Utah is an interesting place, which is why there's been a lot of news. All of this is from this week, Orion. Check this out. Utah's religious nuns are on the rise. Christianity, including Mormonism, is declining. The change in share who say they identify as Christian are unaffiliated in Utah. Look at this. The unaffiliated back in 2014 was only 22%. Look, in 10 years, that's gone up by 12%. Christianity is declining in Utah by 1% in just a couple of years. These two are going to converge. Utahns in a major study were likelier than Americans as a whole. Listen to this. Utahns in a major study were likelier than Americans as a whole to say that they were religiously unaffiliated, even though the state is widely considered the most religious. So we've got a lot of things happening this week. Utah is supposedly the least sinful, but we're seeing a decline in fervor. We're seeing a decline here of Christianity, and also the rise of the religious nuns is definitely upon us. While at the same time, like if we back this up, the people who identify as Latter-day Saints are extremely fervent in their beliefs, very devout. We're seeing a lot of different things playing in Utah. I no longer live there, but I know that you do.
Yeah. That all makes sense from someone living in Utah. I see a lot of the statistics, and I've done videos on the statistics even, and covered how, according to the church itself, the church is very strong, and yet according to every other statistic from non-LDS Church sources, they're not doing so well. There was a couple of years ago one county in Utah and one in Idaho where the church reported more members of the church in that county than lived in that county.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a red flag that something is off here. And I don't know if I can trust your statistics from the church itself anymore.
Yeah, the church is not trustworthy when it comes to statistics, and it's not trustworthy when it comes to telling church history. A couple of other more things that hit the news. Did you watch the Michelle Stone on Mormon Stories? This is the polygamy denier. Did you get a chance to catch this?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, so Michelle Stone, world famous 132 Problems YouTube channel. She's the famous polygamy denier. Says Joseph Smith never engaged in sexual relationships with anyone but Emma, and didn't marry anyone here. Let's see what Michelle's got going on.
Me saying Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy was not about Joseph Smith nearly as much as it was about Emma. Because if these things are true about Joseph, then they're true about Emma, right?
So it's not that no man would cheat on a woman so amazing. That's
no. It's the polygamist. If Joseph is a polygamist, then we have a version of Emma that she's a raving lunatic, shoving women down the stairs, screaming at Joseph, having him beat her, like
disagreeing with it, but then agreeing with it, but then disagreeing,
wishy-washy, having no moral compass. Like it does not make sense. Also,
and then lying about it later and saying it never happened.
Yeah, I cannot find this, like her biography is called Mormon Enigma because it does not make sense. The polygamist narrative of Emma doesn't make sense at all when we look at who the woman actually is. For me, saying,
okay, wait a minute. She's saying that the polygamist narrative of Emma Smith doesn't make sense because Joseph Smith is a monogamist. Do you buy into this type of stuff, Ryan?
I have looked into that argument, not in great depths, but I have talked with people, and it doesn't make sense to me. It like with Emma being out to be a raving lunatic, as she worded it. If you were to be treated the way that she was by Joseph, you would feel like you're going crazy too. She was gaslit a lot. She was presented with horrible choices that turn out to not be choices at all, according to Sarah's law in Doctrine and Covenants 132, or the law of Sarah. And with all that she went through, of course she would act like that. Anybody would act like that. And whether or not she pushed Eliza Snow down the stairs doesn't matter. There are plenty other things that we can see that just demonstrate how much she went through as a result of the polygamy. If there was no polygamy, then a lot of things, to me, it's just the opposite. If there was no polygamy with Joseph Smith, a lot of things that Emma did and ways that Emma acted do not make sense.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is if you want to try to believe Emma, she's provided a couple of contradictory statements about it. And even if you want to believe her final statements to Joseph Smith III, well, then you have to throw out a whole bunch of other women's comments. You can't believe everybody, so you have to pick and choose on who is the most credible. And the problem is that we have a tsunami and avalanche, an overwhelming number of women who said that they had either intimate relationships with Joseph Smith or were actually married to him indeed as a man and a wife would be. For me, this is a case closed situation. I watched some of this Mormon Stories episode, and I find it spectacularly unconvincing. I do have a couple of episodes on the Mormon News Roundup about Michelle Stone, about polygamy deniers. For me, it is basically a shut case. There is no way to put the genie back in the bottle. The church admitted in 2014 that Joseph Smith married up to 40 women. They would never have admitted that if they didn't have to. I just don't know what it is that we're talking about, and I find the entire thing to be mostly a complete waste of time. Any last thoughts on this one?
In my mind, I related to, I hope this is far enough back politically that it's okay to reference QAnon. To me, it sounds a lot like QAnon and how there are just enough pieces to be able to paint this false picture that people just grab a hold of and go along with because it appeals to some emotion, to something that they wish were true, and that's what happens with polygamy deniers. With Joseph Smith's polygamy, it would be nice if he didn't practice polygamy, because the way that he did is awful, and there is a really it is tempting to say that he wasn't just because he claimed publicly that he wasn't, which makes it really easy to go down that rabbit hole and find reasons to believe his public statements and not believe his private statements and his private behaviors.
Yeah, the biggest thing here is because the church has proved itself to be completely untrustable when it comes to presenting church history, that has led rise to these conspiracy theories out there, because we can't trust the church for its own history. Therefore, who are we going to trust? Well, we find new people to trust, and she's incredibly charismatic. She has an intensity and a personality that is really easy to root for her. She is super sincere. She's very spiritual. She is bringing a lot of people into this particular camp, because a lot of people, when you acknowledge that Joseph Smith is a polygamist, that comes with a huge amount of baggage, because what does that say about God? If God is sending angels with flaming swords to tell his prophet to have intimate relationships with 14-year-old girls, that says something about God. So instead of having to wrestle with that, we just pretend that the evidence doesn't exist. I equate Michelle Stone and all the polygamy deniers basically to, like you said, QAnon conspiracy theorists or even flat earthers. This is not a difficult debate. It is not there's not two sides of this particular coin. Now, I do want to talk over this just a little bit, because the church released this LA fire video here, which is a typical church propaganda video, which talks about what the church is doing to help out with the LA fires. Let's just watch a little bit of this, and then we're going to talk over the remainder of it.
Okay.
Standing outside the lot where their home formerly stood, Hillary and John Cannon described the state of their home upon first sight.
This devastation was just all-encompassing. I really just tried my best to not try to hold back or to be strong. It was just John and I. And walking up and seeing that there was nothing left, it's a really deep feeling.
For thousands, their world turned upside down as strong winds enabled
Okay, the rest of it is very, very similar to what we get. We finally have some church leadership who's gone out there and said a few things. But Ryan, this is why I want to bring this up. Just imagine for a moment that you, Ryan, have $300 billion at your disposal. This is what we never have happened in these terrible fire stories, whether it was the Maui fire or whether it was the California fire. What the church could do is take this family right here and buy them a new house and say, thanks so much for being a member of the church. Now that we have incredible resources at our disposal, we're going to use it to buy you a house, him a house, and every single person here a house. The church makes, Ryan, approximately $100 million every single day. I don't know how many Yeah, that's the approximate number. Just while you're listening to this particular podcast, which is about an hour long, the church made $4 million. Okay, they could buy 4 of those people a home right now, but this never, ever happens in these situations. What we get is Elder Holland and others who come out, say a few token words. They give out some bottled water, give out a couple of, they give some people some casseroles, but when the rubber meets the road, they're not helping people in substantial ways. Because Ryan, if you had $300 billion, how easy would it be for you to buy a couple of $1 million homes for these members? I don't know how many there are. Let's pretend there's 100 of them. That's $100 million. That's one day of church income. But what we get here is not that. What's your thoughts on this? Sorry, I went for a long rant.
Well, you're speaking my language. You're getting me all riled up. Do you remember how much the church gave to, I think it was to Maui after their wildfires? I think it was through the Red Cross. Do you remember how much they gave?
I think it was $1 million.
It was $1 million. And then a year later, they gave 1.5. So they ended up giving a total of $2.5 million, which in Maui would build 2 homes. I think there were like 3,000 or something that burned down. It's just like, how do they think this is okay to brag about? This is not okay. Sure, yeah, $1 million is better than nothing, I think. But at the same time, yeah, the church has so much potential. And this is why the church gets the F the Mormons chance, because they put out these propaganda videos, but people see right through them. The church isn't doing what they could do. They put themselves out there as being Jesus's church with Jesus's teachings. But the most important thing is to obey the rules, of which the number one rule is to give them money, and then they don't do good with it. And so yeah, you're speaking my language. But I could go on a rant as well, go on and on with the history of the church's money, and it doesn't get better. I keep thinking that the church will see what other people see when they put these things out there, but they just don't. They just keep doing it.
Yeah, about the Maui fire, instead of helping the people who lost homes in that, they announced a very small donation. And then right after that, they announced a multi-million-dollar temple. They donated, you said maybe $1-2 million total.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the temple that they were going to build in Maui, which they announced only, I believe it was 9 months later, now that I'm remembering, was like a $40 million building. So we have people who's lost their homes, lost their livelihoods, lost everything. You come with very short arms for those people, but then you're going to build another Masonic esoteric castle when there already is one on the island already right there. We're seeing the church's priorities here. And like I said, if you had $300 billion, just whatever it is that you decided to do with that money, as long as you distributed it or helped or even just spent it, it would be better than what the church is doing here. You want to put out a propaganda video like this while people are suffering? I find it to be in extraordinarily poor taste. Any last thoughts on this one?
Well, if I had $300 billion, the interest alone, I would love to put together some sort of a nonprofit in order to get rid of homelessness, to make sure no one is homeless. And the church could do that in the United States. And this would be a great opportunity for them to make themselves look amazing. Look at what we're going to rebuild all these homes with the money that we have because we're going to do so much good. And no, they're not going to do that. They're going to build temples with that money.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and at the same time, we're going to give you a home. And because so-and-so lost his job because all the businesses burned down, we're going to put you on the church payroll for the next 3 months, give you a job doing X, Y, or Z until you get back on your feet. That's what leadership looks like. That's what that's the Christian message. That's the message of Jesus that the church could do. And instead they come in way late. The fires were a long time ago. They did very little during the actual fires, even though they had incredible resources at their disposal. I'm very disappointed in what I'm seeing from the church, but this is absolutely par for the course. Now, speaking of temples, I'm going to give you a couple temple updates here. Speaking of what the church's priorities are, the church is going to sue this small town in Fairview here, Ryan, and the Fairview mayor, even though they went to arbitration, they signed an agreement, but it was not binding, and that arbitration has fallen through. The church gave concessions on bringing the height of the temple down, but that has all fallen apart, and now they're irreconcilable. And apparently the church has filed an intent to sue this small town here. But the Fairview mayor is pleading with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to avoid the lawsuit. This is going to cost a lot of money for this somewhat small town. How do you feel about what's happening with the church in their general temples and in Fairview in particular?
I don't think the church or church leaders realize how much attention this story is getting and how many people see what is happening with David versus Goliath. And the Goliath is the church. And people are rooting for this tiny little town. Fairview has what, 11,000 people, something like that, going up against the LDS Church with their hundreds of billions. And it's not doing them any favors. It's going to really harm their image. It already has.
Yeah, it's being covered across the sea. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And it's a shame to see the church's priorities here. And it's definitely a bad look. And in your neck of the woods here in Lehi, the church's first temple in Lehi, they've given a sneak peek of that. And now we have 31 temples in the state of Utah. That is a tremendous amount of temples. This is what that's going to look like on the inside of this.
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced plans to build a temple in Lehi, that city's first. Today, the church released renderings of the future temple's exterior and pinpointed its exact location. It will be built on an empty plot northwest of 3950 North and Center Street in Lehi. It's not far from Viewpoint Middle School and Belmont Elementary. The church says, in addition to the 85,000 square foot temple, they'll also build a new meeting house at this site. The Lehi, Utah temple is the faith's 31st in the state, including those in operation, under renovation, under construction, or announced. A groundbreaking date has not yet been set.
Okay, Ryan, first of all, there's a temple in Saratoga Springs. There's also a temple in American Fork that I got married in. There's a temple in Linden. There's 2 temples in Provo. There's a temple in Payson. There's a temple in Draper. There's 2 in South Jordan. Maybe I don't have all my temples right. There is 10 temples within about 15 miles of one another. Do we need another temple in Lehi?
I think you skipped Orem. Yeah, it's just it's amazing how things have changed since I was a kid. When I right before I served my mission, I tried to visit all of the temples in Utah. There were like 13 or 15 or something, and I wanted to visit all of them. Meanwhile, I was being taught in seminary and institute that we have LDS church buildings, just regular meeting houses everywhere, because in the millennium, those church buildings will function as temples. And that's how temples will dot the earth. That's what I was taught. And now it's just totally flipped. Like, oh, those meeting houses, yeah, we won't need them because we will have actual $100 million temples dotting the earth, and especially in Utah. And being in Utah, I could drive to, let's see, within half an hour, I think I could drive to 5 temples. And I'm not in Utah County. It's just crazy.
So the same week that instead of announcing help for the LA fire victims, we're announcing yet another temple. That is a priorities that is fundamentally misplaced, in my opinion.
Priorities is right. That's exactly what it's speaking to.
Yes, it is. Now, the city of Las Vegas has had a lot of consternation with that temple too. Let's see what's going on there, because they've agreed to changes have been approved for the Las Vegas. This is the 2nd temple in Las Vegas, by the way. Let's see what's going on there.
A planned temple in the Lone Mountain community will be required to make some changes for that neighborhood. 8 News Now reporter James Schaefer reports on a recent vote.
Lighting for temples for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is directly tied to religious symbolism. However, for this site, you will only see it lit during certain hours of the night.
Please post. Motion carries.
Wait a minute. Before we get going here, Ryan, the lighting on the temple is part of the religious symbolism? Wait, did I hear that right?
It may be symbolism. Did they say symbolism or ceremony? Because the lighting itself is not important. They have temples where they have had to make agreements to turn the lights off at night, and they do. And you know what? The ordinances performed inside are still considered just as valid in those temples.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Motion carries.
At a February City Council meeting, Las Vegas approved a new ordinance which would limit lighting in several communities, including Lone Mountain, the location of a new LDS temple. The city requiring warmer light at 4,000 Kelvin, no lighting above 35 feet with some light shielding, and the lights must be turned off during the overnight hours.
We do have a really large issue in our town, and they're coming in and they're trying to
set aside our zoning ordinances.
Las Vegas joined cities like Fairview, Texas, where the LDS Church changed their temple's height to fit within the ordinances. But back in Las Vegas, legal action filed by residents against the city argued the council was unlawful in its approval of the temple. However, this month, the judge dismissing the case for lack of standing, rendering the argument against the city moot. Now, the LDS Church said in a statement they plan to abide by the law, which does include abiding by those lighting restrictions. Reporting from the Lone Mountain community, James Schaefer, 8 News Now.
Now, the existing LDS temple in the east part of the valley will not be impacted by this new ordinance, and it remains lit during its normal overnight hours.
Okay, so the church is compromising in Las Vegas here. It was the community group, first of all, sued the church, ended up losing over that. But there's a lot of consternation that goes along with this. Apparently, there is a small compromise going on in Las Vegas, but the church does not want to compromise in Fairview. It's interesting to see how all of these temples are prosecuted across the United States.
And the compromise, sometimes their compromises aren't really compromises. Like when they said at the end there that the church intends to obey the law. Yeah, they'll obey the law unless they can change the law to their favor. That's what they did in Heber Valley, where they had the county change. It was Wasatch County, I believe, changed the dark sky laws so that the temple can be lit up at night. And same thing in Fairview. Yeah, they'll obey the law, and the law allows them to sue the hell out of Fairview, Texas, and drive them into bankruptcy. That's legal. And so, yeah, they'll obey the law, and they'll change the law when they can.
Yeah, they changed the law also in the Cody, Wyoming. They changed the law in that Las Vegas already because that temple was really not supposed to have this particular zoning that went along with that. They had to go in there and change it in advance. They do a lot of legal shenanigans that's associated with these temples, and it burns a lot of bridges, and it has a lot of bad press, a lot of bad PR. And I've said this before, I think it's because President Nelson, these temple announcements don't come from the temple department. They actually come from the first presidency. And when the prophet has prayed over one of these temple locations, the rest of the church membership feels that this is a divine directive and that they must implement it in the way that he said. Instead of, if this was just an administrative thing, then it wouldn't call President Nelson's prophetic leadership into question if we just moved it somewhere or changed the height or changed the lighting. It's just the way that the church does these temples is really, really bad for business. It's bad for communities, and it's a bad look.
It's hard to not say that with all that's happening with these temples, that it's all to do with President Nelson's ego, because that sure is what it looks like with how things have changed, where again, comparing it to how I grew up. When I was growing up, a temple would be announced somewhere when there were enough members in that area to justify another temple and enough tithing money coming in to be able to justify building another temple. And yet now, like, that doesn't matter at all. We're just going to build them anywhere and everywhere. And it with these fights regarding temples, it sure looks like it has to do with the ego of the man who's ordering them. He doesn't find a good, oh yeah, that's another change. He doesn't find a good place and make agreements with the city before announcing that we're building a temple, like President Hinckley did. He announces it and then goes to the location and says, okay, we're going to build a temple here. I know you didn't know this until we announced it in general conference, but we're going to do it because I said so.
I think the building of any temple, in my opinion, is a spectacular waste of time and treasure. But if you're going to do it, then the way that President Hinckley did it is the most pragmatic and the most Christian method of doing it.
He compromised. If you look up the history of the Boston Temple, for example, the Boston Temple had a lot of compromises with President Hinckley making those compromises. And that's a good example of how it could and should be. And Fairview and this Las Vegas temple, these temples are just giving the church a bad name unnecessarily. It doesn't have to be this way.
I think also the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania temple is one that President Hinckley compromised as well. It ended up turning into the Manhattan temple because I was
going to say that one doesn't exist.
Right. But he had the ability to compromise, which the modern church seems to really struggle with. I don't want to go too long on this show. Did you see this week here? This is a thunderbolt across the bloggernacle. James Huntsman, famous Mormon, the son of the governor, the younger brother of the governor, former governor of Utah, also the son of the magnate, the chemical magnate, Huntsman, the multi-billionaire. he lost his lawsuit to get his tithing back from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What's your reaction on this one? This is a big news story.
Well, to me, we were all expecting that. I was expecting that, at least, that he was going to lose, because anyone going up against the $300 billion church is going to lose against their money and their lawyers and their pressure that they can put on anyone just about. But I'm glad that
Welcome to the Mormon News Roundup.
Missed basically 11-0 in the Ninth Circuit on the appeal.
That he was going to lose, because anyone going up against the $300 billion church is going to lose against their money and their lawyers and their pressure that they can put on anyone just about. But I'm glad that it got the spotlight that it did. And that's, I think that is a positive, that it made it into the news and it got a lot of people's attention and got a lot of people talking about these money issues, because now these money issues are not going away. And it's partially thanks to this lawsuit.
Yeah, he wanted to get $1.4 million back. He got summarily dismissed, basically 11-0 in the Ninth Circuit on the appeal. They said that you have absolutely no case. There's been a number of copycat lawsuits that have tried to imitate James Huntsman. He has decided that he is not going to be appealing this to the Supreme Court. And the church released I don't know if you caught this, but the LDS Church did release a statement following the dismissal of this tithing lawsuit. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have that linked right here, but the church basically said that that tithing is very sacred, that they do good things with it, and just trust us all. That's basically the sum up of the statement. Which
Trust
is exactly
me, bro. Trust me, bro. Yeah.
That's what all religion boils down to: 3 words: trust me, bro. And that's basically what they're saying about
That's
church
right.
finances.
Yeah, I meant to look up that and read through when I saw a headline, and then I never went back to it. But that's exactly what I would expect it to say, that tithing is sacred, and we're going to use it in the way that we're going to use it.
That's exactly what we don't even need to read it, because we know exactly what the church is going to say. I did read it. I forgot to link to it, but the church did put this out here. I don't know if you're familiar with this one. Hot off the press is, what does the LDS Church do with its tithing exactly? Well, Elder Bednar did field a question about that not that long ago, and this has been making the rounds this week. Let's see what my favorite apostle, Susan's husband, says about what the church does with the tithing.
For people telling you how to spend the money of the church. How do you think about that, or how can others really understand the scale of this?
Let me address 2 things. We have 4 overarching responsibilities. The mission of the church is to help people learn about and live the teachings of Jesus Christ, to share that message with the world, to strengthen and unite families, and to care for the poor and the needy. Now, we do this all over the world. So in terms of scope, that's the answer. The people who want to tell us how to spend the money, I would just emphasize one undergirding principle. The assets of the church are primarily income consuming. They are not income producing. 20,000 meeting houses and facilities. They're all paid for when they're dedicated. All of the utilities are paid for. They're not passing a plate or collecting money in local congregations. That's all done through the tithes that the members of the church pay all over the world. But you've got fixed costs in the maintenance, the utilities, all of those things for all of those buildings. 315 temples in operation, announced, in design, being renovated, or under construction. 4 major institutions of higher education. You don't have to be an accountant to figure out. Those are some big dollars. So when people say, well, what do you do with all that money? Well, there's an episode in the Old Testament about Joseph, who interpreted a dream for the Pharaoh, that there were 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And in the years of plenty, you better prepare for the years of famine. So people want to speculate about the size of the reserve and all that kind of stuff.
You went there.
For needy people all over the world annually, $1 billion for education. And it's necessary to maintain the mission of this church, which is to bless the lives of individuals and families.
So you feel good about where you're at? You feel like it's prudent and wise? And
I think it would be imprudent and unwise not to have a reserve.
Okay, I know that you are I know that you like church finances just as much as I do, Ryan, or maybe even more. So I'm just gonna throw this one to you.
he really used the the reserve excuse, the rainy day. It's a rainy day fund. A rainy day fund would get you through a year or two. The money that the church has earns more interest in a year than they can spend in a year. They could pay for everything that the church does already and pay for everything that they're paying for and still be making extra interest to watch these accounts continue to grow at a slower rate, but still continue to grow. And so to have him say that's a rainy day fund, that's not a rainy day fund. That's a rainy millennium fund. I think it's difficult for people to comprehend just how much money that is, especially in the church when they're told to just trust me, bro, that this is tithing money and you don't get to say what we're going to do with it. God does. And God doesn't tell you, God tells us. So the members of the church just kind of take that and say, oh yeah, I believe, I'm faithful, I'm a good person, and that's part of being a good person in Mormonism. And so I'm going to trust you on that. And as a result, they don't realize or comprehend just how much money that is and how disingenuous that statement is, that it's a rainy day fund. It's a rainy millennium fund is what that is.
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, David Bednar says that the majority of the church's assets are income consuming. That's demonstrably not the case. Church is worth $300 billion. $200 billion of that is in Ensign Peak. That's asset producing wealth. $100 billion of it is in real estate and other physical properties. Now, those do require maintenance costs. There's no doubt about that. To maintain the church's properties costs about $250 million a year. $250 million. That's not that much. The majority of the church, all of the assets, brings in money. That's a completely disingenuous statement for him to make. That might have been true back in 1995, but it is not true today. So David Bednar did at least try to answer the question, but I think his responses were pretty poor. Any last thoughts on the tithing? James Huntsman, what David Bednar said about tithing. Any last thoughts on that?
The other thing that caught my attention is when he rattled off the fourfold mission of the church. Is that the right terminology? And how he says the church is doing these four things. But in reality, it's not the church doing those things. The members of the church do those things, but the church only does those things in so much as it gets them good press. They could be helping the poor. They could totally solve poverty in the United States or other countries, and yet they choose not to. The members of the church faithfully give tithing and then fast offerings as well in order to help the poor. The church doesn't use this tithing money to help the poor. They use fast offerings and they disperse it among members of the church the vast majority of the time, and only two members of the church. But while they have the ability to use the Ensign Peak money, like the Ensign Peak money is bookmarked for church or charity. That's the two things that they're allowed to use it on. And yet the only two things that we know they use it on is to build a mall and to rescue their insurance company. So to say that the church does those four things that he rattled off, no, the church doesn't. The members of the church are good people who believe their leaders. And so they do those things. But the church itself, I don't believe it. They don't do it.
Okay, I'll just hop on to one other thing on this take. David Bednar wants to say they spend $1 billion on BYU. Prove it. David Bednar wants to say that they spend $1.36 billion on the humanitarian giving in 2023, which is the last year that we have publicly available data. Prove it. You want credit for your spending money on missionaries, on education, on humanitarian? I'm sorry. I can't just take your word for it. You have to provide receipts, and that's going to come in the form of an external audit, something that's objectively verifiable. Until you have that, you don't have anything. I can't take your word on it because you've proven yourself through the SEC fine and through the lying of church history for generations to be an untrustworthy steward when it comes to conveying information. So that's my advice to David Bednar. You want credit? Show me the receipt.
Yep, it's been since 1959 since the church gave a public financial statement with what they do with their money. And they have, I would hope that someday someone will have the sense to do that again. Because I think even now with the money that they have, it would be good for the church. but we're still waiting. It's been since 1959. I think it was spring of 1959 when they last did that.
Let me tell you my prognostication. I rarely prophesy on this podcast, but I will do so right now. In the next 10 years, and I'm going to make it very specific because I know how to give a prophecy, unlike Mormon leaders. In the next 10 years, someone at church headquarters is going to take a thumb drive and it's going to upload it onto Reddit, or it's going to go onto Mormon Stories, that it's going to show all of the X's and O's from the beginning of the end of the church all the way up until that point in time. Someone leaker out there is going to tell us absolutely everything, and we're going to have virtually total transparency in the church. So why not just get out ahead of it, since we know that that is going to happen? It happened with David Nielsen. It happened with Ryan McKnight. It happened with other whistleblowers. It's going to happen. That's my prophecy. I got 10 years. Do you think I'm a false prophet? What do you think?
I guess we shall see. We're going to have more leaks. That's how we know about the general authorities getting a very healthy stipend. That's how we know about the hundreds of billions in Ensign Peak. That's, there are going to be more leakers. So it is rather astounding that they still refuse to just be open and honest with their numbers and with their accounting. They have their internal audit, and that they pretend that that's enough to have their internal biased audit.
The internal auditing is a sham. Now, taking us to a couple of more national stories very briefly here before we let you go. What I like about your channel, Ryan, is that you're not afraid to talk about politics. Some of these podcasters out there don't want to talk about politics because people out there, they get so offended if you criticize their political candidate. Hey, the great thing about the Mormon News Roundup and about Ryan Josiah is, we're going to give you the honest truth, at least according to us. So first of all, I saw this and this caught my attention here. The Pope is apparently in some type of health conditions. He's been put on a breathing machine. Yeah, he has been struggling. And the reason that I bring this up, Ryan, I bring this up for one simple reason. Do we ever get told something similar with Mormon church leaders or general authorities or apostles that, hey, so-and-so has serious dementia, so-and-so is on a breathing machine, so-and-so is currently in a coma? Do we ever hear about that from the Mormon church?
No, we hear the bare minimum. It's kind of interesting to compare the two. Like with Jeff Holland was sick for quite a while, and yet nobody really knew his status. Like, was he doing better? There was even a question of, is he really sick in the first place? Because it was rather convenient timing with the fiasco with him being invited to speak in southern Utah at that commencement a few years ago. And then the campus erupted in protests against him, and then he magically got sick. And so there was even that's how open and honest they are. There was the question of, is he really sick? Or is he just sick in order to conveniently get out of this commencement speech that he was invited to give?
And I have to take his word on it that he actually did get COVID, but we never have any verification of these things. What ethical leadership looks like, at least here for me, is what the Pope has done or what other corporations do when they have a president or a board of directors or somebody who's having some health challenges. They let people know. That's what ethical leadership looks like, and that's something that the Mormon Church doesn't know anything about. Now, I have 3 political takes here for this week regarding the news, and they're all from Mormons or ex-Mormons. I just didn't get random folks out here. The first one is going to deal with Dr. Benjamin Park, who I believe is an active Mormon. I'm not 100% sure, but he's going to talk about how this week in the White House was absolutely unprecedented. So here's a Mormon take on current events. Okay, let's see what Benjamin Park has to say. And I'm sure that you follow the news very, very carefully. I want to get your thoughts on what you think is happening in American politics. Oh, man.
Today is one of the darkest days in American diplomatic history. Let's watch a clip of Donald Trump speaking in the Oval Office to the president of Ukraine, a war-torn country that is trying to strike a deal to get America to help them to stop a Russian invasion.
But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh?
What you just saw there was the end of over a century-long American commitment to spread democracy abroad. Now, I could give a multitude of qualifications to America's checkered history in trying to expand democracy in other nations, whether it be their attempts to stop communism led America into a lot of needless and deadly wars, whether they did not fulfill their intent to allow democratic control at the local level in these foreign nations, or even the hypocrisy of trying to push democracy abroad when we were not fulfilling democratic promises at home. But setting all of that aside, there was still an underlying commitment that the American nation would use its global power to strengthen democracy abroad and stop tyranny in eroding democratic principles. That as long as democracy was being strengthened across the globe, that democracy would make America a better place at home. And now Donald Trump is upending that entire history, that tradition, because he wants deals that better enforce his interests and better help him cozy up to foreign dictators like Vladimir Putin of Russia. All of that was a performance for Putin. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, let's look at one more clip from that meeting.
This is going to be great television, I will say that.
If there's anything that Trump loves more than getting his kudos from dictators across the world like Putin, it's good television ratings. That's what he cares about. This is all a show to him that he is going to trample upon American principles and fundamentals in the way of getting good TV press coverage. It might make good television, so to speak, but it's horrible diplomacy. And that's why this is a horrible day in America's diplomatic history.
Okay, Benjamin Park here is making the argument here, Ryan, that this is a horrible day in history for diplomacy and that it's a dark day in the American political history. He is a professor of history and he's also a big-time Mormon OG. Do you agree with Benjamin Park?
100%. It's been, I didn't think I'd continue to be surprised at this point at how low he can go, but I was surprised by this. I was reading about is it called the Transatlantic Charter that was signed around World War II as a result of World War II, and the United States kind of agreed with Europe and other allies to help each other out, and we agreed on certain principles, and that's what we have totally upended. All the principles that America once stood for, we no longer do, and America is isolating itself while Europe is bonding over it. Europe is strengthening itself against allies of which we are becoming one, and it's so frustrating to the point that I'm having a hard time focusing on my usual ex-Mormon content on my TikTok channel and haven't been posting much because my mind isn't on that anymore. It's like that doesn't even matter in comparison with the national stage and even things on the state level. Politics are just nuts right now. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we should be doing is supporting. The question is how much we should be supporting Ukraine, not whether we should be supporting the Russians. I think there can be arguments about whatever various level of support it is that we should be giving them. Should we be giving them tanks? Should we be giving them fighter jets? In my opinion, the answer to both of those, by the way, is no. Have we given them enough money and enough resources? What is the level of support? But we appear to be changing horses. You know, the old saying, don't change horses midstream. It seems like we used to be backing, even in Donald Trump's first presidency, he had a rocky relationship with Ukraine, but he sent him a hell of a lot of money. But we seem to all of a sudden be changing who we're backing in this war. That seems like a very dangerous precedent to set because our allies have always been democracies and we've always fought authoritarians. And it seems like we're doing the exact opposite here. I am very concerned about this, what precedent this sets. And also treating a president of a country in the Oval Office or whatever, in the White House in that manner, that's just not a good look. Yes, it's entertaining television. Those went viral. Those blew up the internet. But we've got to elevate our discourse here, and having Donald Trump and J.D. Vance pouncing on Zelensky, who doesn't even speak English as his primary language, not a good look. Any last thoughts on Benjamin Park, who, by the way, is a faithful Latter-day Saint, to my knowledge?
No, I really appreciate viewpoints from people like Benjamin Park, who know more than me. I try to follow the news and keep myself educated on these matters, and I feel like I do a pretty good job, but I pale in comparison to people like him. So I really appreciate his viewpoints, and yeah, they were sound viewpoints.
Yeah. Now, that was, I believe, a faithful Latter-day Saint version of what's happening in the news. You know, I'm not just covering the news just for the hell of it, folks. These are Mormon or ex-Mormon takes on what's happening in the news. The Mormon News Roundup is about news, and it's about Mormons, and this is what's happening in the world. Aaron Ra is one of the biggest ex-Mormon YouTube channels out there. He's got 350,000 subscribers, one of the biggest juggernauts. He doesn't deal much with Mormonism anymore. He's mostly in atheism and anti-Christianity rhetoric, but he gives a very, very snarky ex-Mormon take on Trump versus Zelensky. You may want to make sure you got the mute button handy because he gets pretty salty, but it's a pretty interesting take.
You know that song, God Bless America, where at least I know I got my head up my ass and don't really know anything at all. You know, that really cringe patriotic song. I'm embarrassed to say that there was a time decades ago when I was proud to be an American. We were the first, and for a while, the only nation of, by, and for we the people, not dedicated to any god or to any particular religious denomination, but to the people. And where your religious belief or lack thereof didn't matter at all, and neither did your ancestral ethnicity. You know, our Statue of Liberty, you know, bring us, you're tired, you're poor, and all of this. We were the place to get to, that everybody wanted to come to, and we were welcoming, you know, for people who wanted a new life. We were the best. That's what made us the best country in the world, that ideology, which we don't stand by anymore. There was a time when we were, you know, when we as Americans were producers rather than consumers. We were the world's leading inventors and innovators and educators at the forefront of scientific frontier. The world came to our universities as the pinnacle of learning because we were the most progressive nation in the world for a while. But today, I'm disgusted that we elected a crime boss who serves a Russian dictator and who tried to extort Ukrainian President Zelensky for his country's mineral rights in exchange for our protection. Gee, you got a nice country here. It'd be a shame to see something happen to it. Trump offered to allow Putin to keep whatever he has illegally taken. Russia doesn't have to concede a goddamn thing. But Ukraine has to kiss our ring and take whatever injustice will allow. Listening to J.D. Vance and Donald Dumbass berate Zelensky today, and understanding the grave situation that Zelensky is in, it grieves me sincerely that the American people could be so callous and so fucking stupid as to allow such a criminal to lead us and destroy everything that we've stood for the last couple centuries, only to bring shame upon our nation once more. God curse America. No, I forgot. There is no God. We brought this curse upon ourselves, so fuck us all. Seriously, I've never been so disgusted or ashamed to be an American in my life. I don't see us recovering from this.
That's quite a different take between the Mormon and the ex-Mormon take, but Aaron Ra certainly brings the heat. Do you really agree with him, though? Are we going to be able to recover from this?
No, I have a hard time keeping my emotions together listening to that, because that's, from everything that I have seen in the news and learning about our history, that's right. That's exactly what's happening. If we recover, it'll take a lifetime. It'll take my kids and my grandkids will do a lot of good, but it'll take a lifetime to recover from this one election, from this one man. It's and that's why I haven't done a lot of ex-Mormon content. Yeah.
I'm a slightly more optimistic. I think that our country, I'm hoping that we have a great deal of resilience. Look, I live in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of federal workers around here who are really, really good people. They do good work. They protect our country. They serve our country. They keep us safe. They run the government. It's vital services that they provide. And I hope that the resiliency that we built up during the first Trump administration, we saw how resilient our government was. Our courts didn't let us down. The Supreme Court, even though it was cherry picked, still didn't let us down. I am optimistic that we will still be able to be the shining city on a hill and still prosecute our version of democracy in the world, even though it looks like we've taken a major stumble here. I'm optimistic. So
yeah, I would have been on the same page as you before the election, and then I saw what people chose and what people chose to support, and so I'm having a hard time being optimistic these days. I actually just today went to. I'm still trying to be optimistic. Today I went to protest a march with. If you go on TikTok and look up Utah March. I went with that group. There were thousands of people. You won't see it on the news. I didn't see any news cameras there. But there were so many great signs and chants about how immigration built this country, about how your ancestors are immigrants too, and things like that, and how that's, when I was growing up, that's to me what made America great. The American dream is that anyone can come to America and build a life and be successful and make their dream come true. And that's what made America great. And now, apparently, what makes America great is shutting that down.
Yeah, you were at this here today?
Yep, I was.
What were they fighting for, or what was the protest for?
It's mostly surrounding immigration. It kind of evolved into just general anti-Trump. But it was mostly, like, there were a lot of Mexican flags, for example, a lot of signs against ICE and the deportations. And so mostly immigration, but kind of evolved into just anti-Trump.
But we don't want to leave people on a gloomy note. We do have the Mormon News Roundup joke of the week, Ryan. And I believe that you have that for us.
I do have a joke, which I was hesitant to say because you've been doing this long enough. I would guess you've heard this joke presented before. Maybe even I gave it, and I don't remember what jokes I gave in the past. But this joke ties into what we were talking about earlier regarding how Utah and the church in general tends to look good externally. How Utah is sinful, even though they pretend not to be. So this joke that I found in a search says, "Why should you never take just one Mormon fishing?"
I don't know.
Because he'll drink all your beer.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
You have to take more than one.
Now, over there on your TikTok channel, before we let you go, what are you working on? What are you going to see if you come over here to Ron Josiah over on TikTok?
What I hope to do more of is politics, especially in Utah from an ex-Mormon perspective, because the church still controls politics here in Utah. It just does. And whether they like to admit that or not is a different issue. And so to have this perspective from someone who's seen both sides of the coin, I think can be helpful. And as I mentioned earlier, getting out of my niche of ex-Mormonism to just politics more generally, people want it. It was when I posted Utah political videos, some of them really took off in ways that my ex-Mormon videos just can't. So people want it. And so if you're here in Utah, especially, then you'll appreciate that. I will continue to do ex-Mormon content, especially with news. Like as you bring up the Las Vegas temple, I didn't know about that new update. And that's something that I make sure, or I try to make sure and do updates regularly on the temples that are being fought about and other money issues. I love the money issues, same as you. So if you like the ex-Mormon content, I'm going to still do that to some degree as well.
Yeah, big fan of your channel. Can't say enough good things about you. Before we let everyone go, if you could hit the like, hit the subscription, greatly appreciate that. Follow the Mormon News Roundup. We are on TikTok. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters here real quick before we go. Royce, RMW, Carol, David, Blaine, Brent, Colette, Michael, and a special thanks to Sophronia. And then our channel members over there on YouTube, Emmerich, Starla, Jeffrey, Garrick, Dave, and Lee. thank you so much for all of you Patreon supporters. We couldn't do it without you. Ryan, Josiah, thank you so much for coming on the Mormon News Roundup. I greatly appreciate that.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, always think celestial, and remember.
No one hallowed hand can stop the Mormon News Roundup from progressing.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.